Good evening, universe. Tonight I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in September and October. In case you missed my last video, I've been gone for a little bit. I wasn't feeling too well, so I took a break for a couple of months, but now I'm back and I'm excited to talk about all the books that I read while I was gone. Most of these are going to be middle grade books because I am taking a class on middle grade literature right now. But for the class, we get to select the books as long as they're widely spread across many genres. So these are all books that I selected to fit within particular genres, but they were books that I was excited to read as well. And the first book that I read in September was Beetle and the Hollowbones by Aliza Layne. This is a graphic novel, and it's about a young goblin witch who is friends with a blob ghost, and their name is Blob Ghost. They basically just look like a blob and a ghost simultaneously, but Blob Ghost haunts a mall, and our main character, Beetle, finds out that the mall is going to be torn down, and the person tearing it down is the aunt of an old friend of Beetle's. So Beetle tries to reconnect with this friend and see what they can do about tearing down this mall, because it seems like Blob Ghost can't leave, and they don't know what'll happen to them if the mall gets torn down. So I thought this was really cute. It was a fun adventure. The art was great. I love the character designs on all of the characters. There were some really great moments. I thought this was really fun and entertaining and magical and emotionally satisfying. Overall, I thought this was great. Next, I read The Last Cuentista by Donna, Barba, Higuera, and I had a complex relationship with this one. I was so excited to read this. I went into it with such high expectations because I'd heard great things about it. This is a middle grade sci-fi about a girl in the future who is traveling to another planet because Earth is about to get annihilated with an asteroid, a comet. I think it's Halley's Comet that's like flying too close to the Earth. I think. I don't remember fully. Either way, a celestial body is going to crash into the Earth and destroy it. And our main character gets the opportunity to leave Earth with a group. And basically they're going to a new planet that looks like it's viable for human life. But while they are flying away, the mission gets hijacked by a sort of extremist group who is all about like erasing history and not really prizing the importance of the arts. So what the book is about is largely the conflict between our main character and this extremist group and her attempts to undermine them and tell the stories of her people. That's what she's always wanted to be, is a storyteller, which is what Cuentista means. So you get a lot of moments of her telling stories. There is a lot of love for stories in this book, and that was one thing that I really loved. Overall, I thought this was a pretty dense book for middle grade. It took me a long time to finish it compared to the other books that I was reading in this age range, and I somewhat enjoyed it. There were a lot of moments that I thought were really well done. I think I would say that this book is really well written and I admire it, but I didn't necessarily enjoy it. And I'm not 100% sure why. I just didn't really connect with it, which is a shame because I was so excited about it. Overall, though, I do think it is worth a read. I think it, like I said, was really well done. It just didn't really click with me for whatever reason. Next, I read The Wolves and the Walls by Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean, and this is actually a picture book, and it follows a family, but mostly a young girl, who hears wolves in the walls of her home. And since it's extremely short, I can't really say much more than that, but this is a sort of offbeat comedy, I want to say. Like, I thought it was funny, but the illustrations are very unique and strange and beautiful. If you've seen any of Dave McKean's work, you'll know what I'm talking about. Or if you've seen the movie Mirror Mask, he worked on that with Neil Gaiman as well and made a lot of the visuals for it. It's the same kind of visual style. But I thought this was fun, interesting, light, and quick. I don't really have too much more to say about it. I was a little bit confused about what the point was, but it was still fun. And if you're looking for something really quick and readable with really engaging art, I think the art was definitely the highlight for me, then check this out. Next, I read The Strangers by Margaret Peterson Haddix, And this was my first book by her that I've read, even though I found out later she has a pretty large body of work. And this follows 3 siblings who learn that 3 other siblings who have all the same names and birthdays as our main characters have been kidnapped. A lot of this book is unraveling the mystery of that, so I don't want to say too much more, but I loved this. This is a science fiction, and I thought it was super fast-paced, really readable. The relationship dynamic between the siblings was believable. One of them is, I think they're 8 and 10 and 12, I believe are all their ages. And I love the family dynamics and the slow solving of the mystery. I might continue with this series just because I thought it was so engaging and compelling. This is one that I would probably pick up the sequel to. The way that it left off, I'm not sure if I want to or not, but I might. And I had a really good time with this one. So if you're looking for a mysterious science fiction that is really fast-paced with a ton of tension and great family dynamics, then I would recommend this one for sure. Next up was Frazzled by Booki Vivat. And I don't really have too much to say about this one. This is about a young girl who basically suffers from anxiety and is always really worried about everything going on around her, particularly in the realms of school and figuring out her place in it. I thought it was generally fine. It didn't really hook me too much, but it was a quick read. And if you were trying to introduce the idea of anxiety to someone, then this would be a successful way of doing that. Although I do have another book coming up later, maybe in my November wrap-up. Yeah, I think it'll be in my November wrap-up, but there's another one that I think does a better job of describing anxiety. But this would be a good, really approachable one for that. I just wasn't really hooked by it. And finally, for September was Malamander by Thomas Taylor. And I really loved this one. In this book, we follow Herbert Lemon, who is the lost and founder at a hotel. I think it's the Kraken Hotel. There is basically a mystery surrounding what would be a cryptid, a legendary creature in his town of Erie-on-Sea. And it's just this very mysterious story. There are lots of unanswered questions surrounding this town. And especially for this first volume, the Malamander, the very spooky fish man monster creature. So this follows the mystery of this young lady, Violet Parma, comes to town, and her parents disappeared years ago after being somehow involved with the Malamander. She wants to find out how and what happened to them, and she thinks that Herbert Lemon, our protagonist, is the person to do that. The writing was great. It was really funny. Herbert had a really distinct personality. Violet had a really distinct personality. There's so many characters in here that I thought were so good, and the setting is just fantastic. I really loved this fantasy book. This is definitely one that I would recommend to any young fantasy reader. I am excited to check out the rest of the series because I will probably continue with this one on my own time once I'm done with this class. Definitely good for fans of like Lemony Snicket, but who want a little bit more fantasy in there. Overall, I had a great time with Malamander. And that was everything I read in September. So now we're going to move on to October, in which I read 8 books. The first of which was The Cavendish Home for Boys and Girls by Claire Legrand. This is another one that I think was successful but wasn't really for me. And this is a horror novel, but like middle grade level of horror. So I thought I could handle it. I don't really like horror, so this is not my genre. I don't read in it often. I don't want to read in it often. I don't like horror movies. Horror is not for me. But I was thinking, it's middle grade, how scary could it be? It's not that it scared me, but one of the reveals did gross me out a lot. So it did successfully disturb me. But basically what it's about is the main character is Victoria. I think her name is Victoria Wright. And she is a perfectionist. She loves everything to be in its place and everything to be perfect and clean. And included in that are people. And so she becomes friends with a boy in her class, Lawrence, Took me a second, but that's his name. She kind of takes him on as a project because he's a musician and he's very messy and things are not in his place. He has like a white streak in his hair that everybody makes fun of him for. And so she takes him on as a personal project and they kind of become best friends. Then one day, Lawrence disappears and Victoria thinks he's probably gone to the Cavendish home for boys and girls where kids go to shape up and potentially never come back. So she goes on an adventure to find out what is going on with this school, with Lawrence, and ultimately with the town that they live in. I thought this was pretty spooky. There was a lot of good tension, a lot of like eerie moments. So it wasn't just like, boom, scary thing, but it had a lot of good, it built up the fear pretty well. And then a lot of the reveals at the end were pretty great. It had some great twists. And overall, I thought this was really well done. Again, not really for me, but great if you want a young, spooky read. Next, I read Cleo Porter and the Body Electric by Jake Burt. This was a sci-fi novel, and it was written before 2020, which is unfortunate for the author because it was released in 2020, and it's about a pandemic. So I can't imagine this did very well because I don't think a lot of people were super excited to be reading about a pandemic during that particular year. Basically, it's a futuristic novel where this pandemic, influenza D, spreads across the globe. I mean, that's what pandemics do. But to solve this problem, everybody lives in sequestered little homes and they never leave them. So everybody is trapped in their apartment for the duration of their lives, with some exceptions. And our story kicks off when the main character receives medicine for somebody else. It somehow erroneously comes to her apartment and she decides to venture out to deliver it. So it's basically about her adventure attempting to deliver this medicine. There were a lot of things I liked about this. I liked our main character a lot. I thought she was very compassionate and a good main character to follow. We had some great side characters, but it did feel a little bit empty. Overall, I found myself a little bit bored with this and kind of questioning what's the point we're going for here. I'm not really sure. And if it's what I think it is, I'm not sure that I agree. So I don't know. This one didn't really work for me, but I thought the main character was really good. I thought the world building was mostly really interesting, and the reveals at the end were engaging, emotionally charged. I don't really have much more to say about this one. It's a fun sci-fi futuristic novel if you want to read about a pandemic. The next book I read was one of our not middle grades, and it was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I really loved this. This is one of his 4 secret projects, and it is, I believe, the first one that released, and it took me a long time to finish this. I actually started it, I think, in July or August, and it took me a really long time to get back into it. But I am so glad that I did because I loved this book. I loved the world building. I loved Tress and the other characters that are introduced. I loved the setup and the chapter titles. I just really had a great time with this. I thought it was such a fun adventure. I guess I'll tell you what it's about. So this follows Tress, obviously. She lives on a world that is extremely dangerous because all of the oceans are made out of these magical spores. And if the spores touch water, they have an effect. And it depends on the color of the spore what the effect will be. So Tress is from the Emerald Sea, where the spores will erupt into vines, which is kind of dangerous, but compared to the other spores that we get, it is child's play. Tress loves cups and hanging out with her best friend, Charlie, which is unfortunate because Charlie goes missing and Tress realizes that she's going to have to be the one to save him. So this is mostly a nautical story. Tress spends most of the book on the ocean trying to find Charlie and rescue him. Again, I thought this was so charming and so fun. There were a lot of really beautiful lines in this that I read out loud and shared with my wife that I thought were just so fun and interesting. Like, I really loved this perspective. So Tress of the Emerald Sea, if you haven't picked it up already and you like fantasy, I would definitely recommend it. And with that, we are back to homework. So the next book that I read was Just Be Cool, Jenna Sakai. And this is about a young girl whose parents are going through a divorce, and she has just been broken up with. She is not doing good. She also wants to be a journalist, so a lot of the book is about her trying to get a particular story. And this is technically a romance, and it kind of kicks off when she goes to this cute new diner in town and finds this wonderful table that she's so excited about, but the next time she comes to the diner, some other kid is sitting there and she is so annoyed at him. Over the course of the book, they start to talk to each other and, you know, romance ensues. And I really loved this. This book actually made me cry because of mostly the handling of Jenna dealing with her parents' divorce. I thought was really well done. The romance for me was definitely secondary, but Jenna's relationship with her parents and all this anger that she has built up over everything that's happened in her life, I thought that was really engaging. Jenna is a great character. She's proud and stubborn and just so angry, and that anger really carries her through all of her actions. And I just thought she was really well developed. I thought the story was interesting, and I loved her friendships and relationships in general. This is a wonderful contemporary story. Okay, I had some technical difficulties, but now I'm back. The next book that I read was The Deep and Dark Blue by Nicki Smith. And this is about a pair of twins who are royals who have to go into hiding after a coup. And so after this coup, they basically decide that what they're going to do is hide in a convent because they're less likely to be found there. And the convent is full of like magical women who weave the fabric of reality. Oh, one of these twins is eager and itching to get out of this as soon as possible to restore them to the throne and reclaim their title, while the other twin thinks she might have found exactly where she is supposed to be. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a fun fantasy story. I wish there was a little bit more world building in it, but that wasn't really the point of the story. This has more exploration of gender identity, and that's kind of the point. Overall, I thought this was a fun, quick read, and I would recommend it for a fun adventure story. The next book I read was The Last Fallen Star by Graci Kim. This is a novel under the Rick Riordan Presents imprints, and it deals with Korean lore. The main character has been adopted into a family of magic users, and she can't use magic. So then her sister, Hattie, our main character's name is Riley, and Hattie one day is like, what if I do this spell so that we can share our magic? And Riley is like, this is a great idea. Now I'll really be part of the family once I learn how to do this magic. So Hattie attempts to do the spell and it goes horribly wrong. And now Hattie's life hangs in the balance. And in order to save her, Riley has to find the last fallen star. There's a lot of great lore in this. I thought it was fun and funny, and it's another one that made me cry. I'm an easy crier. But overall, I thought it was great. A great adventure story with good emotional beats and fun characters. Next, I read The Moon Within by Aida Salazar. This is about a young girl whose mother is basically forcing her to have a moon ceremony when her period comes, which is basically like a celebration for it. And our main character does not want this at all. So it's about that, as well as relationships. Particularly, she gets a crush on a boy. She has a complicated relationship with her best friend because her best friend is not accepted by the boy, and it's a whole thing. This is told in verse. I moderately enjoyed this. I thought the verse novel was kind of an interesting format, and I was glad to be checking it out. But I didn't really care for our main character, and I thought a lot of the choices that she made were really frustrating. Interesting for the novel in verse format, but I didn't find it particularly compelling beyond that. And Finally, I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I have tried to read the Threads of Power books before. That's not what they're called. A Darker Shade of Magic. I've tried to read A Darker Shade of Magic before, and I didn't get far. I put it down as a temporary DNF with the plan of maybe picking it back up again. And this book made me want to pick up her other book more because I really enjoyed this. I thought it had great characters. Basically, what it's about is our main character, whose name I can't remember. She can see ghosts following a time when she drowned and survived, but she survived different. And so now she can see ghosts, and her best friend is a ghost. And her parents can't see ghosts, but they are like ghost hunters. They have a show about ghost hunters. And her mom is a believer, and her dad is like a historian. And so the three of them move to, I want to say Edinburgh, somewhere in Scotland, and they go looking for ghosts. And so it's about that adventure, looking for ghosts. So this is supposed to be a scary book, but it's not really that scary. There are some moments that are pretty terrifying, but for the most part, the scares were pretty low, and I really enjoyed this. Like I said, it made me have more faith in getting through her other book, and so I'm excited to check that out again. Her other book, I say, as if she doesn't have a massive catalog, but I'm excited to check out more of her works. I will say, even though I really liked the main character, the one thing that kind of bugged me is she makes a lot of references to Harry Potter. Overall, I thought this was great. I love ghosts. I know I said earlier that I don't like horror, and I don't, but I do love ghosts and ghosty type things, especially like comfy ghosts. I want more comfy ghost content is what I'm trying to say. This does not count as comfy ghost content, but it does have a ghost friendship, and that was good enough for me. So overall, I enjoyed this, and if you like ghost friendships too, then probably this would be a good one for you. So that is finally everything I read in September and October. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I am finally caught up, and starting in December, I will be posting my monthly wrap-ups again. Hope you're having a good reading month, and have a great night, universe.